Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis is a pro wrestler, author, broadcaster, business development advisor for Lightning One Inc. Nick has been a professional wrestler since he was 18 years old, starting in Norfolk, England. I hope I pronounced that correctly. After receiving a break at 21 years old, appearing on Gladiators, the UK version of NBC's American Gladiators, he caught the eye of Impact Wrestling, which at the time was the top-rated show on Spike TV. After a 6-year run with the company that saw him become the first British wrestler to win their world championship, he decided to explore new horizons, and in 2017, he joined forces with Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, right? Who had recently purchased the National Wrestling Alliance. Since then, the brand has been on a mission to establish a new digital model for pro wrestling in the 21st century with their acclaimed digital series, 10 Pounds of Gold, an episodic show, NWA Power, by the way. I'm wearing the gear, and I'll explain to you why. As well as other digital projects, Nick had his first book, The Superstar Body, published in 2015 by Pitch Publishing, and is about to launch a sports nutrition brand. And most importantly, that has become my catchphrase, by the way, Nick, on this show. Most importantly, the reason Nick is here is because wrestling has been part of my life since I was like 6 years old. So I'm talking about Captain Lou Albano, Iron Sheik, all of the greats, Dusty Rhodes and everybody else, so I've been watching it. My dad was a huge fan. He passed on in 2000, but I've been watching it. And it's funny that I stopped watching it for when my kids were born, because and in the earlier years, I didn't want them to pick up some things that they were hurting each other. But at one night, I was watching it late into the night. My kids just showed up and sat down next to me. I guess it's in their DNA to watch wrestling. They started watching wrestling, and it just has become part of our lives. And both of my kids are avid fans of all things wrestling and wrestling entertainment. So, Nick, welcome to the show. And we want to tackle the subject of managing your personal brand. As you know, the reason we chose this topic is that, when you look at entertainers and professional athletes at their craft, what they do, whether it's baseball players or basketball players or wrestlers or Olympians or anyone else, quite a lot of them, I would say a huge percentage of them, because I come across this and I have a lot of meetings with them, 90+% of them or even more, they focus at the craft that they do, right? And they don't really take care of what I believe is the thing that they need to do once that craft that they do, either over time, it has some sort of a shelf life or anything like that, so that for them to have continuity from growth and branding and things of that nature. So I think we will tackle a lot of those kind of questions. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. And yeah, you nailed it really, because one of the things that I talk about a lot with younger guys. I'm 33 now, so I'm in terms of the wrestling business, I'm kind of in my prime. Most of the time, sort of the prime age for performers is kind of 30 to 40, just because even though obviously it's a physical endeavor, it usually takes that amount of time for someone to get the seasoning and the skills required and the experience required to sort of find out who they are and figure out kind of what unique characteristics they can offer and how they can connect with the audience. So usually, it's not always the case. There are prodigies that sort of come up very early and make a big splash, but usually it's kind of 30 to 40. But the one thing I really wish that I had understood and grasped more in my 20s was the points you were just making. And if someone had articulated them to me in that way, and made it more about, look, this is your business for the long term, as opposed to, because you get the advice, but it usually comes in the form of an old wrestler or a former wrestler kind of going, oh, you gotta get ready for when you're out because you can't wrestle forever, and you just kind of go, whatever, you think you're indestructible. It's kind of framed in that sort of negative way, right? Instead of someone like yourself, articulating it in that much more practical sense. Like, you need to develop your brand for, beyond, your time as an active participant or performer. And it's something that I definitely have really wrapped my head around in the last 3 years working with Billy and Lightning One, simply because we've really bootstrapped this whole brand. Even though it's an old brand, it was established in 1948. In many ways, it was really a brand new startup. It was really just there was a lot of confusion, and sort of puzzlement in the industry of like, why is this rock star and this sort of young wrestler, and like, why are they resurrecting this like old brand that no one's cared about since like really the late 80s, or at least in a sort of mainstream sense. And it was just this sort of unique combination of what I always say of traditional values and a modern delivery system. So it's really sort of given me this new perspective of brand management and brand development on every level, not just the brand I work for, but also my own personal brand.
Yeah, I mean, just for context, NWA is an iconic brand. I mean, it has existed way before WWF or WWE, so I think wrestling's greats like Ric Flair, I think, came out of an NWA wrestling. Dusty Rhodes, I believe.
Sure. I mean, basically, even the WWF was originally the WWWF when it was just a Northeastern regional promotion. It was still a very, very lucrative business, probably the most lucrative still at that point with Vince McMahon's father, Vince Sr. But they were a member of the National Wrestling Alliance. The NWA was more of a governing body. It was in a lot of ways, it was basically an illegal trust. But it was a group of different regional territories that existed, because obviously this is pre-cable. So all of the television was syndication. So it was all local markets. And so basically these different promotions would exist in their own sort of fiefdoms where they had their own regional television. And, this is during the time where maybe your average sort of local market might have had 3 or 4 channels. So they did incredible ratings, incredible shares, which then translated to, very good live event attendance. And that was really how the whole ecosystem existed. Was the television really was not the earner. It wasn't that, there was no rights fees, oftentimes they paid for their television spot because it was basically their shop window to all their live events. So it's, the business model for wrestling, or particularly for, the high level pro wrestling like the WWE or now their competitor AEW, that's completely changed, because now the main pot of gold is the television license fee, so it's really interesting to see how it's adapted. And in many ways, we at the NWA had almost brought back, in some respects, the old-fashioned kind of territory model, because we did our show, our episodic show, NWA Power, which was a studio show, which was what most of the regional shows were like. So it was that sort of retro forward kind of nostalgia touch, but it was done in a modern way. But in many ways, from a business perspective, it was done in the same way, because obviously it was on YouTube, so it was free. We got no rights fee for it. Obviously, there was a small amount of revenue from the advertising, but nothing really to write home about. But the idea of it was to drive people to pay-per-view and to merchandise and to live events.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see a kind of a full circle, having been watching it for such a long time. That shows like WWE, Raw and SmackDown, and then you have AEW, adapt the model that NWA actually resurrected, basically the studio show, because of COVID-19. And it's funny that the earlier shows that I watched on both of those brands were basically the earlier days of NWA Power. When you guys were trying to figure out like what works and how you want to make changes and stuff, they went through the same kind of thing. And now you have a lot of lighting and a lot of excitement around it. There's 3D animation and stuff like that on the WWE show. And it's funny that you guys had already started. I think you've been in this now for NWA as a digital product for the past 3 years now, I believe, or
Yeah.
a little bit over 3 years.
Yeah, 2017 was when we started. Yeah.
Yep. Actually, there is an iconic photo on my stream where Billy Corgan, myself, and my brother Gary V, and so we actually had, and at that time also David Lagana. We actually met to talk about what we wanted to do and how should wrestling be done in 2017 at that time. So there's an iconic photo of us meeting to just discuss that. And the outcome of that meeting was, Billy said, "Oh, you know what? I have an idea about this NWA. I want to think about acquiring it." So that was kind of the resurrection of the whole brand in that meeting.
Yeah, I know that they were very bolstered by Gary V's interpretation of it, because he felt very strongly about sort of retro brands being kind of resurrected, like Converse and different things he used as an example, and that's really how we saw the brand as like for existing. For fans, for lapsed fans or for existing fans of the genre, they kind of appreciate it on a kind of nostalgia level. But for newer fans, for kids and stuff, that to them, they see something that's totally new, because to your point, prior to the COVID restrictions, the main sort of television wrestling format had been in place since about the mid-90s. Like the current sort of television format was really established by Eric Bischoff at WCW with Nitro.
Oh yeah,
it became this sort of it was a live event done for television as opposed to a television show. And it was a sort of big crowds, matches, guys coming out and doing promos in the ring. Guys sort of doing more of the storylines unfolding in a big arena rather than in a studio or at a sort of promo set. And that format, had been in place for, at this point now you're talking 25 years. So for a lot of fans, that's their only point of reference. For a couple of generations now, that's what they think a television wrestling show is. So when we came along with the studio show, which if you're an educated fan, is a sort of a throwback. But to a lot of fans, they went, "Wow, what's this?" I mean, I remember using my niece and nephew in England as a point of reference, and they were my niece was born right around the time I was doing Gladiators, which was a big television show. It was big high rated show on the weekends in the UK, and I mean, I was on buses, billboards, newspapers, magazines, stuff. So it was genuine kind of exposure. And they didn't care, and because they're kids, and even I had an action figure and all this stuff. And then even when I was working for TNA, and they had a very good television clearance in the UK, and actually were beating WWE in the ratings in the UK during that time. Again, they thought it was cool to an extent, like that they could say, "Oh, that's my uncle." But when we did NWA Power, because they're of that generation that YouTube's their jam. Suddenly
that's their TV.
Suddenly they're going like, "Oh, my friend wants. Can you sign something for my friend?" And suddenly they think it's so cool because I'm on YouTube, which is so funny because you hear a lot of fans that kind of go, "Oh, they're just on YouTube. It's just a YouTube show." But like to these kids, I think my nephew I think is 11 now, and or maybe 12, and my niece is a couple of years younger than him, and they're going like, "This is so cool!" Like we partnered with RetroSoft Studios to do this Retromania game, and it's basically going to be it's the official sequel to what's it called, WrestleFest, I think it was, the game from 1991. Mm-hmm. And again, I just thought, "Oh, this is so cool," But even my niece and nephews they saw the commercial I did for that, which was a deliberately over the top, cheesy kind of 80s style kind of graphics and, special effects and whatnot. And they just thought that was the coolest thing. And they was like, "I'm going to get that game for Switch. Like, this is so cool. I'm going to play it," So there is a method to the madness. I think a lot of people.
But by the way, I personally love those ads, retro ads that were broadcast during the show. I loved it when I was watching it. It just put me back to when I was a kid watching these things early on,
Yeah, and I think the thing for us was that it really, I don't know if there was any, real deep strategy with that. It really just was like, hey, this would be fun, if we did some of these sort of throwback commercials. But very quickly, I kind of saw a path with that to a revenue stream, because I kind of went, if we get these commercials over, like we can start going to advertisers and saying, look, if you work with us, we'll make a commercial like this. So that a bit like the Super Bowl, obviously on a much, much smaller scale, where the commercials become part of the show. So people are kind of sitting there going, oh, I want to see the next commercial, as opposed to, oh, God, I've got to sit through commercials. Because that's the biggest problem with commercials in general, is that how do you make one that people actually want to see in the first place, let alone actually pay attention to and convert from? So I said, if buying commercial space with the NWA also comprises of having a custom-made kind of commercial for your brand done in this sort of retro style that immediately connects with our audience, and our audience are very, very loyal. They're small, but they're very, very loyal and very, very well converted. So I saw that as an immediate sort of extra significant revenue stream for the brand.
So as you were growing up as a young athlete in wrestling, right? Who were you looking up to? Who was your mentor that you looked up to and you got advice from?
Well, I broke in Norfolk, which is, Norfolk it's a beautiful county. It's very, very picturesque. It's become, in a lot of ways, where I grew up in Northwest Norfolk, has sort of become a very, very popular spot for wealthy people to have second homes. It's sort of become a bit like the Hamptons, but it was very quiet, very rural, very nothing happening. So, I remember when I really, decided that I wanted to be a pro wrestler. Besides horrifying my mother, I was also kind of looking at it like, where am I going to go? At first I thought, I guess I'll have to go to America. I didn't really sort of understand at that point that there would be ways for me to learn, the business. But in actuality, it was way better for me to come up in the UK at that time, because this was, early 2000s. The scene, the independent scene in the UK was on fire. It was because we had pro wrestling in the UK has always been a sort of a thriving business, just not a multi-million-dollar business, right? It's always been a sort of steady, consistent entertainment, for the general public. And the big part of that model was the holiday camps. So to try to describe holiday camps to Americans is always difficult, but they're basically somewhere between a vacation resort and like a campground, but it's a campground on steroids. It's a campground, but it's got sort of much more in the form of entertainment and facilities. There's usually pools, and the big part of a lot of them, Butlins are the biggest ones. The big part of their appeal is that basically if you go on vacation there, all the entertainment is free. So they're constantly paying different acts to come in, magicians and music and everything. And one of their bread and butter acts is wrestling, because it was cheap, self-sufficient. The guys come in, they put their stuff up. They do, wrestlers have always been known in the entertainment business as being very sort of turnkey, right? They're very low maintenance. It's like they just show up, they do all their own stuff. We're independent contractors. We're not divas. We're very we don't need anything. We're just maybe have some bottles of water backstage.
That's good enough. Yeah.
Yeah, we just take care of ourselves. And so it was a very popular form of entertainment. So actually, as for a kid coming into the business, it was an ideal place to learn, because I had started lifting weights young and had sort of worked on my physical appearance. I was able to get booked quickly. And so I was wrestling 5 or 6 days a week in my first year in the business, which is unheard of anywhere else now. That would have been the case back in the 70s and 80s in the US, but not by the 2000s. That would have been unheard of. So the level of experience, because you can go to a school, and we're actually getting ready to look into opening an NWA training facility ourselves, to train young talent.
Wow.
But there's only so much you can do, in a training school environment. To learn this business and to learn performing, you have to perform. It's the same as music or stand-up comedy or theater or anything. There's only so much you can do in a controlled environment. You have to sort of find your style, you have to find your beats, you have to find your personality, and your rapport with the audience by working in front of an audience. So the opportunity to do that so frequently at such a young age was massive. So it actually ended up being really advantageous, growing up where I did, because I broke in with the Knights, and many people know them now as the subject of the movie Fighting with My Family.
Oh yeah, Paige.
Yes, right. Paige's family. Yeah, that's right. I was trained by Ricky and Julia to start with, and then I went to a couple of other schools, and then I went to the US to train with Harley Race, and I went to a school in Atlanta. I kind of made the point to invest in myself, and I kind of knew that. Even then, I kind of knew I need to go to a few different places to sort of pick up different things, because I knew that the British style would teach me certain things, but I needed to pick up American style stuff if I was going to succeed in America, which is where the money is, and I trained with some Japanese guys because I knew I needed to sort of understand that, because the Japanese industry is another huge separate industry. So I did try to make a point to learn different places and invest in myself. I mean, I spent every penny I had to come over and train with Harley, but it was worth it. I mean, it's still to this day, I've made lifelong friends and really picked up a lot. And it helped a lot now coming full circle with the NWA, because before Harley passed away, he was, because I had gone to his school, he was able to sort of understand that and lend his name to us and give that sort of seal of approval, which is huge in terms of credibility, for the brand. So, I mean, it all worked out, those little things they don't necessarily always pay off immediately. They might pay off 10 years, 15 years down the road, but they do pay off.
Yeah, I mean, it's an investment in yourself over the long run. So let me kind of fast forward kind of the timeline now to, I think in our human history, I think it was around 2008 or 9, around that time, when everything shifted, right? What you did before that, even though internet and e-commerce existed before 2008, but I think a humongous thing happened in 2008 and 9. And besides the financial crisis that everybody talks about, I think the major shift that happened is you as a person became the brand, right? And now you had the control to kind of manage your brand, and as in whether you're an entertainer, personality, e-commerce expert, doesn't matter, right? And at the forefront of it, I think it was someone like Gary Vee that, at the time when he was broadcasting and stuff, there weren't tools like this, like Restream and things like that to make it easy, but he did it, at that time. So I think that shift happened. So when you're looking at yourself at that time, right, and from 2009 time period forward now, managing your brand, I mean, being part of NWA, I think puts you on a digital platform, because all the other brands that I see, they're not really digital platforms. They are primarily a TV-based platforms that utilize social media and they utilize digital, but they're not digital native. I think the resurrection of NWA as a digital native, I think, gave it a lot of power, and including the people who are in it, all the talent that's in there, to give them that power. How did you see your shift from that point forward on to today?
I think, I have to admit, I was a little behind the curve on that, and at the time, I was sinking my teeth into this, I just saw it as an opportunity for me to sort of reinvent myself, but also as a way to finally be able to present my vision of myself in my own way. Because up until that point, my entire career in my 20s, I had worked for a big company with a multi-million-dollar budget, with TV rights, and TV was God. TV controls everything, and so I was always at the whim of any number of people on any given day. hey, this guy thinks that you should do it like this, or this guy thinks you should do it like this, and this guy wants you to be more like this, or this guy thinks that you're a snooty aristocrat, this guy thinks that you're a Roman gladiator, and so you're performing in a way where you're not really wrestling. You really have to sort of own yourself. You really have to command attention, and you have to really be comfortable in your own skin. And it was so difficult for me to do that when you're constantly being pulled in different directions, because when you're a rookie, it's like there's always someone going, look, just do it like this, listen to me, and you don't get that chance to sort of find yourself. With this, the approach from the very beginning was, we're going to be authentic. And what I mean by that is, we're not going to create a false reality. We're going to work with reality and use that as the backdrop to create the compelling storyline. So our first major approach, our first major sort of storyline and presentation was between myself and Tim Storm, who was the current NWA champion. And the whole point of that was to showcase the fact that this guy, Tim Storm, first of all, wonderful human being, one of those guys that when you actually meet him and speak to him, you get that aura. He's a genuine good man, and he's got a deep voice, and he's an imposing looking guy, but you can tell there's a genuine warmth to him. And his whole career, he'd been trying to present something else, and we went, no, who you are is what's going to endear you to people. So we said, hey, he's not a big superstar. He's not this, hugely successful wrestler. He's a school teacher. Wrestling has never been able to be his full-time occupation, but he's damn proud of being the NWA champion, and he's a real man. And then with me, instead of saying this guy's Magnus and he's a superstar and he's been a world champion and he's this and that, we told the truth and said, yeah, Nick Aldis had a good run in his 20s, and then he decided to move on, and things had kind of floundered. And it kind of took the audience, because for once they went, oh, we're not being sold something, we're joining something on a journey. And that's been a real eye opener for me. And that's become our primary focus for the brand, is when the audience come with you on a journey, they stay with you for much longer, because if they feel like they're contributing and they feel like they're part of the journey with you, and they feel like they're part of the team and they have an identity. I wrote an article recently where I said, there's a good solid number of people now for whom the NWA is in first place, and they kind of stick their flag in the ground and say, this is my top wrestling brand, for me. And it's because we gave them that ability to suspend their disbelief, because we didn't give them anything that they had to. They didn't have to make any leaps, because we told them the truth, and we used that then to drive them to a match with a predetermined outcome. But because everything else was real, they went, wow, like, I genuinely don't know where this is going to go. There was nothing to telegraph the ending or the next chapter, because it was all real. And that was the same thing that we did with me and Cody, All In, and some of the other big milestone events that I've been a part of in the last 3 years. And the result is that I would say, despite being on television on a major network for 6 years, having beaten Sting, Jeff Hardy, Kurt Angle, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, all these big names, I have my level of respect and credibility in the industry is the highest it's ever been, based on this YouTube, on this digital brand.
Awesome. I think I actually have two different questions for you. One, when I look at the wrestlers that have actually pivoted from just being a wrestler, right, to being something else, right? One, the humongous name in the industry is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? He had, it's funny, Rocky Maivia, or the earlier days of The Rock, the way he used to dress compared to what he became, and then he pivoted to movies and stuff like that. The personality, actually, a lot of his personality kind of comes through. So that's one name that comes to mind that pivoted really well to completely another career, basically, right? And he's now resurrecting a lot of franchises that may have failed over time, and then he's reviving them. That's one big name I can remember that did a great job with that. And the second name, another wrestling's great, is Diamond Dallas Page, DDP, right? With the whole thing around yoga and meditation, and you could even see the on Hulu, I think there's a special with Jake the Snake Roberts, and how he helped. I think he has helped quite a few other people too. I think Razor Ramon was one of those other guys too. Yeah. Scott Hall. Given that, it seems like, in case of Dwayne, it happened at the prime of his career. In case of DDP, after WCW was done, I think he had a very maybe short stint or no stint at WWE, but then he pivoted and did this. And he's been known for helping a lot of wrestlers. So that's another kind of, from a career standpoint, that was a pretty good shift. I think he has been part of some of the skits in AEW. I think recently I saw him there too. Now, when I see the wrestlers, each wrestler should be a digital brand by themselves, right? Their presence on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, in fact, also. And when I say that, I don't mean playing out the character, whatever character. In your case, the NWA champion and the storyline and continuing that. That's one part of it. That's part of your NWA wrestling part of your life. It's the other passion. Gary Vee calls it the side hustle. It's between midnight and 3 a.m. You're working on it, and there's no cameras on at that time, right? If it's basket weaving, or if it's a sports nutrition brand in your case, things like that. I think it needs to start early. There's a very young wrestler right now in WWE, Ricochet, right? I really like him. Or EC3, I think he worked with him too. Another very talented wrestler, in my opinion. Now, if they focus just on wrestling, right? What happens when there are times like this with COVID-19? There's only so many slots available for people to do a show and do a storyline and stuff like that, But if you have these other aspects of you, that wrestling is one part of your life, not the only thing, right? Then you have all of these other things that you could be doing, right? And you can lend your name to those kinds of activities. So I think in your case, I think you're actively involved in it. I think you have a sports nutrition line. Do you want to jump into how you got involved with that?
Yeah, well, I'm in the process of launching it now, and I'm basically working with the distributors on the products and figuring out the most streamlined way to which platform I want to use for selling and things like that. And basically, I'm in the fun stage of it now, where I'm sending different designs and names and stuff out to fortunately the vast number of people that I've been able to sort of acquire over the years as trusted advisors, male and female, and guys who are high up in the industry, Olympic athletes, all the way down to like personal trainers and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting that the point you made about being a bit more robust in a very uncertain environment. So a lot of people are aware of the fact that I was offered a contract at AEW very early on, before they started on TNT, several months before, in fact. And at the time, I said, I appreciated it, but I was, I wanted to stay with the NWA. And a lot of people would look at a decision like that, and also the conversation. There's been a perennial conversation about me as far as WWE is concerned as well. And a lot of the time, people kind of might see it and think that I prefer being a big fish in a small pond. But the way I look at it is, by being so synonymous with this digital brand, as long as this brand exists, I exist. And I know that by helping to really have developed the entire brand identity that has become so synonymous with me, it's such a symbiotic sort of relationship that I now have access to that platform to promote my own interests moving on from it, as long as there is some sort of relation to it. So if I was to go to AEW or WWE, for example, I'm not going to be able to go, hey, listen, I've got this sports nutrition brand I want to launch. Do you think you can help me? Because they're going to say, well, no, because if we do it for you, I have to do it for everyone. But with the NWA, I absolutely can. I absolutely can utilize what we've built here to help me, promote my side hustles. So in many ways, I'm looking at this as a more practical way for me to develop some of my more entrepreneurial endeavors. And that's a big part of it, because it is, again, it's betting on yourself. It's tempting to be able to, I could go to be on TNT and, sign a 6-figure contract and yada, yada, yada. But again, you're putting your destiny in someone else's hands again. And for me, I feel like I'm in control of my own destiny, for better or worse. And if you're entrepreneurial and you like I have, if you've experienced the peaks and valleys of the wrestling business, you learn that sort of necessity breeds invention. So when everything's going great and you're flying high, you're not thinking about like, what should I should be preparing my next revenue stream. I should be preparing my next source of income. But when you've had enough of those uncertainties, and you're in a situation now where, even though, look, Billy's very wealthy, but he's not going to throw his money away. So it's kind of like, this business has to perform. Mm-hmm. I personally, I get such a rush from that. Like, I enjoy sort of feeling like I'm on a mission. Like, I've got to turn this brand into a profitable brand. Like, I've got to make this business work, and I'm thinking, if I can do it with this, then I know I can parlay that into other successful brands, and I can learn much. I've learned so much more here than I would just being another guy on the roster of a big company with a huge budget. So for me, a lot of it is about my own personal development as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think if you identify what those things are, and it's not necessary for you to know what those things are, right? Because it's a journey, right? I mean, you might start out by mimicking others. Like, let's say you go like, okay, you know what? I could do this yoga thing. I can do the meditation thing that DDP does. But DDP does that, not you. It's when you are looking at The Rock, and you because there are so many other wrestlers, you have seen them have a kind of a small role in other things. You think that you would achieve the same thing, but that works for The Rock. It doesn't work for you, right? I think if you take it as a journey and you take it slowly and kind of understand what those things are. I mean, one other name that while you were talking came to mind is a woman wrestler named Tori Wilson. She also does
Tori too.
Yep. Yeah. So that's I don't know, something's going on with my mic. I hope that everybody. Are you listening to me fine?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. So that's the thing that I would think that people who are watching this, if you're a young athlete or a professional athlete and so on, I think you should give yourself a try. Like, there are so many things you would do. You know what? It will fail. 100% it would fail. You should be okay with that. You should be okay with, okay, you know what? I tried that. It's not for me. And you're going to find what that thing is. However, I would completely maximize everything to do with your personality, right? Let's say if you are an NFL player or whatever, and then you do your signings and you do your virtual shows or you do in-person shows or anything like that, once we're outside the pandemic, right? You should do those things, but maximize doing all of it, right? But what we are talking about today, it has nothing to do with any of that stuff, like getting yourself out of that element and doing the uncomfortable stuff. Because as you know, in the gym, and as you can see, I don't go to the gym at all, So going into I'm going to use the analogy though, right? When you go into the gym, the growth happens when the pain starts, right? That's when you get the maximum amount of growth, because you're tearing the muscle, it's growing, and you're pushing yourself There in human history, people had not run a certain number of miles in a certain amount of time, right? Until that one person beat it, and then they became the thing,
Right.
So I think be open to trying, especially if you're in your 20s, right? And you're breaking into that thing. You could be a young NFL player or baseball player or a wrestler or anyone. You could be a musician for that matter, right? Every year, try something, right? By the time you're 30, you would have tried, if you had started at 20, you have tried at least, if you give 1 year to each one of those things, you have tried at least, honestly, you can say, I tried 10 things. 9 of them failed. It's not for me, right? I should not be selling, I don't know, fashion, because that's not me, and I don't know what I was doing, right? But number 10, you're going to hit that. And then that's going to be your thing, and you could be managing that brand on the side, and it doesn't mean that it gets in the way of your career, right? You could be running your career, and if you get it outside that hustle mode, right, when you're not doing midnight engineering, then you could actually hire people to actually work for you to do those things while you're overseeing it. But when there comes a time for you, let's say you make an energy drink, for instance, right? You said that you're in sports nutrition. If you make that energy drink, and there have been plenty of acquisitions, whether it was Coca-Cola or Pepsi or EAS or any of these kind of great brands, they actually purchased those because the entrepreneur made the product and it just pivoted to an incredible adoption from a consumer standpoint. You could have that success story, right? But if you cannot have it, it's like you miss 100% of the at-bats you didn't take. You didn't stand. You know what? I could strike out 9 times. It's fine, But the 10th time, at least I'm going to hit the ball. I'm going to make contact and stuff like that. So that's just my thinking. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. And obviously, like I said when I was promoting this, I'm very flattered that you would have me on to talk about it, because obviously you're a guru at this stuff, and for me, I'm a rookie. And I like I said,
no, Nick, you're on your journey.
I'm a little late to the party, but I'm a fast learner. You said something about the pain coming from the growth coming from pain, and that's something I say a lot, and it's so funny because when I work with people online, and if you go to my website, nickaldis.com, and you go to the store, I'll do a custom 90-day training and nutrition plan for you. And it's one of the things that I get a lot from those people is they go, I just don't really know what I'm doing. I go, that's fine. That you're already way ahead of most people by admitting it, and I explain to them, if you commit and say, look, there are 24 hours in a day. If you commit 1 hour, to this and go, it's not about time spent in the gym. It's about intensity, creating some damage that you can then repair stronger from. It's such a great analogy for life, because like I think Jeff Bezos said, you've got to if you try to be comfortable all the time, you'll never be comfortable. But if you consistently put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you will end up comfortable. And I've been so engaged in that world now, of that mindset. The average millionaire has 7 sources of income. So to your point, if you try 20 things and one of them works, that's one. So you might have to try 140 things to get to your 7 sources of income. But if you try 120 things, you've got way more chance of being a millionaire, than if you just put all your eggs in one basket. This is going to be the thing that makes me rich. It's like with the sports nutrition brand, with a pilot I've been developing, that I've sent off to a few people, like with another book that I'm working on. I'm not looking at any one of those things as, oh, this will be the ticket. This will be the one thing. I'm just looking at them all as like casting a line out now. Hey, I'm going to cast this line out and see if I get any bites. And if you've got 10 lines out and one of them gets a bite, great, you know, and it's like the one thing I would say, if there are any young wrestlers or anyone in the business listening to this, I think that one of the biggest hindrances to that approach is ego, because the wrestling business has a tendency to be a bit of a fishbowl, and there's wrestling fans, God love them, very passionate about our industry, but they have an insatiable appetite to enjoy in people's failures, you know, and revel in people's sort of failed attempts at particularly things outside of wrestling, because they become very territorial, you know. So with Rock, it's like, yay, but for a minute he was resented, you know, by fans for sort of thinking he was too good for wrestling, and you know, and he never said that. He was like, no man, I love pro wrestling. I'm a third generation guy. I'm just like, I'm going to be the biggest star in the world. Like I'm going to go own this. I'm going to go own all this shit. And he did. And like, you can't stop that, you know, that force of personality. But a lot of the time there's this fear that exists. And I know it because I experienced it, of when you try stuff, you either have a tendency to kind of half-ass do it because you don't want to seem like you're really in case it fails, you know. And that's just you're already losing when you have that mentality, because you then go, oh well, I was just trying it, I was just, you know, I wasn't really kind of. But now I again, learning from the NWA and our whole thing being about authenticity, it's like the NWA, for example, did a show called Carneyland that was, you know, that was an attempt to pivot during COVID to sort of do a kind of wacky, zany, kind of scripted comedy show. You know, wasn't necessarily our strongest suit, you know, in terms of the talent and stuff, but it was an attempt. And, you know, it wasn't a rousing success, but it was like, if we just own it and go like, hey, you know, we tried that, like, people kind of, you know, you have a bit more of a freedom. I had a really good conversation with a friend of mine, Rory Karpf, the other day, because I've been developing a pilot, and I sent him a first draft, a rough cut. And he, you know, had some tremendous insight, because he said, look, the story here is that you are making it yourself. And he's like, you're not covering that in this pilot. You're just doing it. And he's like, if you make it clear to the audience, to your audience, that you're doing this yourself, like, you know, you're self-taught, like how to edit and, you know, direct and produce, it's like they'll give you way more of a pass, you know, so that the expectation won't be as high, because that's a big problem with wrestling fans, is that they create these massive expectations once you've had a little bit of success. So like the minute that you have a successful show or a successful event, suddenly it's like, when's the next one going to be? When are you going to get a roster? When are you going to have a TV show? When are you going to have a TV deal? You know, like, when are you going to run arenas? And it becomes this thing where if you start really reacting too much to that, you know, you'll fall off, because you have to go, hey, just chill. We've got a plan here. Stick with us on the journey, you know. And that's the one thing I've really sort of developed, is that ability to go, hey, I'm trying something. It may or may not work, but I'm going to commit to it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, and I may not necessarily tell you about all of them as well. You know, on a show like this, I will, but when I'm doing a wrestling related podcast, I'm not sitting there going, I'm going to launch a sports nutrition brand and I'm going to revolutionize the industry and yada, yada. It's like, no, because I'm not even really attaching my name too much to this sports nutrition brand, because that's going to be limiting in the mainstream, you know, appeal of the brand. If it becomes like a wrestler's sports nutrition thing, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are immediately turned off by that. And I have the self-awareness to understand that I'd rather make a successful brand than a brand that has my face or my name on it, you know, because ultimately I want to own a successful brand. I don't need my face or my name to be lumped on it, you know. And it's just that, finding that balance of checking your ego at the door and just, yeah, like you said, just learning to just try stuff and not being afraid to fail.
You know, in that example you gave of the 100 tries you did, right? And then 7 things that succeeded, and now that has put you on the right track. the 93 things that failed, I would call that learnings. Like literally, if you take those 93 things and give it 4 pages each or 3 pages each, that's a book.
Yeah.
Even from that learning, those learnings and what you call failure, and you're beating yourself up, the 93 things, 2 pages or 3 pages each of what you learned from those 93 things, that's a book you can sell on Amazon.
Yeah.
So
John
even the
Kavanaugh.
thing that you thought that failed 93
Yeah.
times is a successful product that you could self-publish, get a publisher to publish it. I tried this, failed. I tried this, failed.
Right.
Great. There have been a lot of great inventors, and other business people that have failed tremendously, right? They've not failed 100 times. They've failed 14,997 times, before they got their Dyson vacuum cleaner, before they got their light bulb, totally. all of those things. So like, why do you think, I really love what you said about the ego, right? In the digital day and age, right? Everything has a number associated with it, right? I did this post, I got 3 likes. I did this other video post, I got 97 likes. Okay, what did I cover in that 97 like video that maybe I can look at how I can modify it so I can go from 97 to 114? But why are you complaining about the 3 likes? It's in your past, move on. You already had a success. Take that and see how you can amplify that. Like, so the more you check the ego at the door, right? And by the way, it's the ego thing is not exclusive property of wrestlers. The ego thing, I've seen it in business with business people. These are not sports athletes. I've seen it as baseball players. I've worked with former NFL players, and the sooner they get to the place where they believe that, okay, you know what? Forget about the ego. Let's focus on what we need to sell. We need to sell eyeglasses. We need to sell sunglasses. We need to sell blue light filters and whatever it is, right? I'm not above that. Like if I take a blue light filter during COVID-19 and I can sell 50,000 units of it at $20 each, you know what? There you go. That's your $1 million right there,
Yeah.
So it's that kind of a thinking, like checking the ego at the door, I think does wonders for you but not that you don't have a backbone. It's more like, the negative side of ego, right?
Yes.
If you can focus more on the results, and just like you do in the gym, the more reps you do,
your ego is like having it's like having a very powerful weapon. If you use it correctly at the right time, it can be it can be a real help. But if you allow it to control you too much, or you use it at the wrong time, and you let it become engaged when it doesn't need to be, then it can really hinder you. And it's talking about what you said before about you using your perceived failures to sort of then finding another way for it to turn it into a success. One of my favorite Tony Robbins quotes is, resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. You gotta stop worrying about what you don't have and go, well, hey, if I'm resourceful, that's the ultimate. I'm already so much more equipped than the average person, because if I can look at these 5 things that mean nothing, but somehow manage to put them together and they mean something, or the fact that I don't have the thing can be the thing that sets me off on the right path. Is there's always, like you said, there's always a success buried somewhere in your circumstances, and that it's important to, and a lot of that just comes down to your mindset. Like I've really, the last few years, really focused on developing a morning routine and really working on my mind, because again, like you referenced the gym earlier, I spend 2 hours a day on my body, but no time on my mind, and then I would find that my mind would be my weakness. It would be, because I would be easily triggered, or be easily offended, or easily distracted, and lose motivation quickly at the first sort of hurdle, the first perceived failure. And working on my mind has been the thing that's really pushed me forward in the last couple of years, and it's what's held me steady during this very weird COVID time, because it's like, hey, I've learned a bunch of new skills during this time. Like I took a couple of courses. I've finally, force myself to learn editing, because in my mind's eye, I could always see what I wanted the final product to be, but I always just left it to someone else. Oh, he's an expert at that stuff. He'll do it. No, you do it. And now I'm looking at it and going, wow, if I can keep learning this and really, the more reps I get with this, like I get really excited about thinking where I could be 6 months from now or a year from now, and go, wow, I could do this for other people. I could do this, and because I've always loved advertising. When I was a kid, my parents always said he's going to be in advertising, because I would mimic commercials I saw on TV, and I would say, hey, this is how you would sell this. And they'd go, well, that is quite a good idea. So there's a part of me in the, that's always been kind of into promotion and advertising and sort of, and that's why I think I fell in love with the wrestling business, because it's an immediate sort of emotional manipulation to get you to a point, where you're going to part with your money. And it's like, it's a fun game, and it's like, it's exciting it's like gambling, it's like, hey, let's see if this one works. Oh, this one worked. This one got a bunch of people to part with their money. Oh, this approach, maybe not so much. And one thing I wanted to expand on with what you said, as far as the social media stuff, like, oh, I posted this one thing and it didn't get that many likes, and I did this other thing, and analyzing it. I would also extend that to looking at other people, because another thing that happens in wrestling a lot is it's very easy to look at the success of other people and sort of resent it and be like, oh yeah, well, that's just because he's got this or that, or, and instead of actually really looking at it and going, so what is it about this, this guy, like the Young Bucks or Cody or Marty Skrull, or, these guys who sort of really were DIY and sort of self-made kind of brands and stars. They were a huge influence on me, because I was kind of lagging behind them, because I'd been sort of living in this sort of pampered, like, oh, I'm under contract, I just get paid, and someone else will take care of that stuff for me. And then I kind of ended up on my own. It was like being stranded on a desert island, like, oh, what do I do? So, and it was thanks to guys like Marty and stuff, and I started going, hey, yeah, I could make my own vignettes. Like, I could hire a guy to shoot this and that with me and put this thing together and market myself, and so now and now I don't even do that. Now I shoot my own stuff and put it out. Like, wrestlers coming into the business, when I came in, your source of contact was you might email a promoter, right? Like, or even call them on the phone still. If they were like Brian Dixon was old school, he checked his emails once a week. But for the most part, early 2000s, you might send an email with an attachment of a picture, right? Before that, you sent an 8x10 in the mail. But, then a few years later, it's like now you send a link to a YouTube video of one of your matches, and then you send like your Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Now, now you need to make your own vignettes. Now you need to like produce, direct, and edit your own like trailer. If you're going to stand out, because everyone else has got all the other stuff. And it's like that's the progression. It's like, how bad do you want it? Do you want to, are you going to learn those skills? Because trust me, most good wrestlers, most successful pro wrestlers are actually also producers. They just don't know it. They also have a mind for producing, because they understand the flow that has to happen and the emotions required and the kind of the journey you have to take the audience on. That's producing, so it's understanding the skills and then kind of looking at them and deconstructing them and developing them.
I mean, one example, huge example, that I want to bring up, it's actually staring us in the face, is Billy Corgan himself. There is no reason, like literally, if you think about it from a purely consumer perspective, right? There are zero reasons for Billy Corgan to be doing anything with wrestling, right? Zero.
Right.
Like literally. For him, that's his side passion. That's his passion that he, just like me, I'm doing e-commerce, but my passion is wrestling also. That I'm willing to invest in it. And in his case, he's investing in it to have this NWA brand and so on. And to him, that's a very big example of a successful rock star having a side hustle. That's a humongous brand now with NWA and how he has pivoted in the whole industry to basically what wrestling should be in 2020, basically, So that's a very interesting angle too, like a musician turned into like owning a wrestling brand and running that wrestling brand on a day-to-day basis, you know.
Yeah, he's you know, he's a very unique guy, you know, and he's still working, you know, very hard on his music, you know, in 2018, which was really when when the brand really kind of got some rocket fuel with it, with All In and everything that came off the back of that. He was touring arenas. So he was sort of, he was kind of in between his gigs. I mean, he couldn't even be at All In because he was performing that night. So it was, you know, so
I remember.
Yeah. And so he's been a joy to work with, you know, in a lot of ways, because it's just so different, because he is able to, he sort of owns his emotions on it. Like he doesn't try to sort of, he doesn't hide anything from me. You know, if he doesn't like something, or he's upset about something, or in a bad mood, he'll just say it. You know, and which is such a refreshing change from a lot of the time in wrestling, where you sort of, you know that something else is going on, but they're kind of telling you like, no, everything's fine. You know, and then suddenly you get screwed. You know, or something happens. And with Billy, the collaboration and the communication is very open. It's not always necessarily positive or negative. It's very honest, and I feel a freedom to be able to speak my mind with him on any level, which then basically means that the trust, you know, becomes more solid, because once he knows, all right, this guy's in it to win it. You know, he's in it for the long haul. He wants to build and develop this brand, and I've told him my intention in the end is to own a piece of it. You know, I want a piece of equity, because I believe that we can turn it into a 9-10 figure brand. So it's like, of course I want to explore the possibility of owning a piece of it, but I'll earn it, you know. But I'm like very open with my intentions on it. Like, hey, I'm coming for a piece of this. If we're going to turn this into a $100 million, $200 million brand, like, you know, I'm coming for a piece of it. And he's kind of laughs, okay, you know, like, and that's where the trust comes from. For example, with the training facility, it stemmed from a different idea I had pitched him for a series for our Patreon, and he kind of went, I'm not sure I see it, you know. I kind of know, so I went, okay, no worries, I'm going to try it anyway, because if you don't like it, I'm going to probably use it for my own, you know, channel, whatever. A few days later, he calls me and says, what if we did an NWA facility? You know, suddenly it's like from here to here, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, and then we can do a series all around that. And I'm kind of like, okay, you know, like I was talking about an idea that would cost a few grand, and now we're talking about a few hundred, but all right, you know, like, and it's, you know, he had that, you know, that time to sort of stew on it and think on it. And then when this could be something. And now we're really talking about a high level of trust, because he's basically going, all right, put your team together. I'll allocate some funding to it, and we'll figure it out. And you guys just go do it, you know, you know. And so for a bunch of me and my, you know, my buddies who are all in our sort of early 30s and just all kind of in that same position, we've been wrestling for a while, but we all really want to sink our teeth into something a bit more challenging. It's like super exciting, you know, scary, but good scary.
Good. For the young athletes, young musicians, young talent, what is Nick Aldis's $100,000 expert insight, that advice that you want to leave them off with, that they should do, starting like literally off of this video, right in the next minute?
I would say when it comes to your all of your social media platforms and all of your basically your window, the window that you create with your audience to yourself, there needs to be a level of authenticity to it. If you present something very larger than life and very, you know, supernatural or over the top or anything, that's absolutely fine. But always try to remain in the mind of someone who is not necessarily completely clued up to everything you're doing. Always try to put yourself in the mindset of someone who's seeing you for the first time and going, if I'm seeing this if this is the first thing I see of this guy, is this going to make me intrigued to delve deeper and to go further and become a fan, or is it going to put me off, or is it going to make me too confused? And to me, I think that what I've found in my career is that embracing the authenticity of your situation and then developing that dialogue with the audience, they come on the journey with you. And like I said earlier, if telling ain't selling. If you're telling the audience to support you, they're kind of like, eh. But if you tell them that you appreciate their support and you ask them to sort of come on this journey with you and kind of be on your team, then it works, and they come with you and they stick with you for good. And I mean, I talked to someone yesterday on a Zoom call who's one of our top level Patreon subscribers. They were fans of Billy's. They live in California, and because Billy had basically asked his fans for their support for the NWA, they flew out to Atlanta, and they didn't watch wrestling. And now, husband and wife and their daughter are all diehard NWA fans, because they're like, this was so fun. This was, because they came with a sort of open mind and just a sort of expectation of enjoyment. And they got it, and now they're like diehard fans. So now they're talking to me, and it's about creating that level of trust and communication with your audience, and understanding that it's a symbiotic relationship. Like, they're on the journey with you, and they're kind of on your team.
Well, Nick, thank you for joining me today and sharing and kind of unpacking your entire personal brand and your journey with us. I really appreciate having you on the program.
I appreciate you asking me. I'm very flattered.
It's always a pleasure. To me, when your passion coincides with your business, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm very lucky to have that kind of a crossover between those two things. Thank you for being part of the show, and have a good day.
You too. Thanks, Sabir.
Okay, bye-bye.